My words today are titled Spunky Girl Heroine. I admit it, I have a weak spot for spunky girl heroines. This is not how I saw myself growing up. Consciously modeling myself on my father, I was peaceable, affable, manageable, passive. But my mother was a first grade teacher who read to me every night when I was little and encouraged my reading and carefully pointed me in the direction of books with girl protagonists. I loved the stories with boy protagonists too, and I crossed the gender line easily to identify with them, an important skill I still possess. But my mother, who before meeting my father left her abusive first husband with my older sister and brother in tow, she was keen to have me learn stories about girls who dared, who had adventures, who weren't all sugar and spice. She wanted me to understand agency and desire and grit in girls as normal and healthy, and she wanted me to build up some resistance to a culture that she knew from experience would tell me otherwise. She wanted to make sure that, should it ever be my turn to choose to leave a man who didn't have my best interests at heart, I'd feel able to, as she had. Two admirable qualities my mother had in abundance was that she was authentic and that she was fierce. Our unnamed protagonist in The Most Magnificent Thing reminds me of my mom. Now, my mom was no engineer. She was an educator, and the teaching of reading was truly her special gift. She taught hundreds of young people to read, first as a first grade teacher, then, after she got her master's, as a special educator. My gentle giant of a father was a scientist, a metallurgist, who then made a good living as an Abbott exec growing cultures for erythromycin. My mother, for her life's work, relied much more on intuition than on logic or rigorous method. But my mother was, like our girl protagonist in the story, an experimenter. As a parent especially, she loved to try new things, like, for example, assigning household chores to her children based on age rather than gender. And as with our protagonist, if things didn't go her way, my mother might show her temper, which could be explosive and a little frightening. But then it would blow over, and she'd move past the point of frustration, back into learning and reworking. She was a woman of many epiphanies, her own and those she drew out of the people around her. I don't think of myself as naturally at the core of me like my mother or like the girl protagonist in The Most Magnificent Thing. I grew up trying to stay small and hide out. I was always trying to avoid detection. I often stuck to the safe and the known in order to avoid the risk of censure. And I have, especially as an adult, tended toward perfectionism. As social science researcher Brené Brown has explained, perfectionism is a 20-pound shield. It may protect us from criticism as intended, but it also hides us, and it's exhausting to carry around all the time. When perfectionism is the driver, says Brené, shame is riding shotgun, and fear is the annoying backseat driver, especially the fear of what people might think. It's hard to live an authentic life, experimenting, trying new things, and sometimes failing, maybe even falling flat on your face when you are worried about what other people might think of you. This is a lesson I've had to learn the hard way. My students helped me to learn it, actually. When I started teaching college students 26 years ago, I learned pretty quickly that the chief barrier to timely paper submissions was perfectionism, or more precisely, what my later therapist referred to as the 3 deadly Ps: perfectionism, procrastination, and panic. Sound familiar? These bugaboos do not make for an authentic life or a timely essay. It is really as a teacher that I have learned to live a little more like my mother and like the girl in the story. And this is, I think, what the world needs of us. Folks in my circle of influence do not need another automaton gliding through the same old safe channels. They need to see real people engaged in authentic problem solving and map making. There is a significant gap between perfectionism and what Brené Brown calls healthy striving. It's well and good to seek excellence, but if we would achieve it, we need to be willing to risk failure. The protagonist in our story is clearly unafraid of failure. Her early models, attempted and abandoned one by one, are failures that are apparently to her just part of the process. She is no automaton. Clearly, she has access to her own authentic emotion, including her anger, an emotion so frequently denied utterly to girls and women, as if we could disappear it by censure. If she has her bad moment, she also has a good friend, sturdy enough to witness it and help her through it. She is not seeking anyone's approval but her own. While it is fortunate to have her assistant, only she will know when she has achieved the most magnificent thing. This isn't up to anybody else to determine, and it isn't up for debate. Other people in the story find that they like her work for reasons and purposes at varying distances from her intentions. But it isn't up to them to decide when her project is done. She will know, as she does at the end, when the goal has been achieved, when the project has achieved magnificence. I also love the way the book is written, that the text is open, that the protagonist, assistant, and project are all unnamed, so that we only know the particulars of them through the illustration. Our central character is every child, but especially every girl, as she is meant to represent and encourage qualities denied to all children in our patriarchal, white supremacist, perfectionist culture, but especially denied to girls and women who are especially expected to look perfect. Importantly, if you cannot bear the uncertainties of experimentation, it's awfully hard to become a scientist. In order to achieve excellence through creative, authentic striving, we must be willing to bear the possibility, nay, the likelihood, the near certainty of failure. Those of you who've worked closely with me over the past year and a half have, I hope, come to see that I own my foibles. I try to give folks fair warning about things that are hard for me, like dates and scheduling. It's embarrassing when I mess up, so I want folks to know ahead that I'm always, always working on it. Then when I do mess up, which I inevitably do, I apologize. I don't grovel. I work hard at not falling into shame, at holding my flawed human self in love. But I do own my errors, which are many. This is because I am trying to live authentically in community with all of you. I am trying to be willing to allow you to see me, to see my journey. I hope you know as we proceed together that this doesn't mean I don't care about excellence. Quite the contrary, it's because I care about excellence and want us all to have the grit and resilience to work creatively and authentically toward it that I am willing to share my vulnerabilities with my beloved community here. The most magnificent thing is, as it turns out, a dog-sized scooter sidecar, something I would never have in a million years dreamt up in my girlhood. I love our girl engineer for the ways in which she is not like I was as a child. But I also love her authenticity, her willingness to fail, her determination to persist. These are qualities that, thanks to my mother and her spunky girl heroines, through patience and determination, I have developed in myself over time. Indeed, learning to live more authentically is something we are all capable of doing, both individually and in the context of our beloved community. May we learn to be real with one another, to embrace one another's gifts and vulnerabilities, and to strive authentically in an environment safe for learning toward excellence in our congregation and community. May it be so. May we make it so.